Hey there, hunters. Welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Now, I played a ton of Monster Hunter 4U, but I actually never started making guides and stuff for Monster Hunter until like Gen or GU, so I kind of missed that boat on making the 4U content. But, that being said, 12 years later, I still kind of wanted to make guides for, the generalities of gunning in 4U, just so the information's out there in video form and can be referenced in case anyone's going to go back and play 4U and want to get into gunning. So today we're going to talk about bow progression with gear and all the weapons with 4U, tips for gunning and, things to keep on your mind, stuff like that. We're going to talk about coatings and what's worth using, and pretty much anything else I can think of. So let's just dive into this. So the first thing I want to talk about is my opinions and experiences with bow here in 4U, just so you kind of know what you're getting into. And for what it's worth, it's rather simple. Bow in 4U and Old World in general is a lot different than 5th gen bow that focuses on like dash dancing and never stopping your volleys. So if you never played Old World bow, it plays more like a ranged greatsword. You charge up the bow, you wait for an opening to land your headshots, and that's basically it. You don't even get to do like escalating shots like 5th gen, so you have to manually fully charge up your shots, shoot it, and then charge back up again. So it's much slower since you can't just keep your charge up all the time like you might be used to if you played World and Rise. You still power shot when available, but that's like the only two things you do. Charge and shoot, and power shot. Now, I personally like the slower, more methodical playstyle to bow because, as I mentioned, it's like a ranged greatsword. So if you like greatsword, bow plays very similarly, so you probably like that too. Now, the main things you need to keep in mind when you play bow is your positioning to maintain your critical distance, understanding your weak zones, and take care to be very, very precise with landing your shots, which, again, tends to play a lot like greatsword. So it's hard to actually give advice for gunning in general in terms of like the actual gameplay because the weapon moveset is so simple, it's just point and shoot. The skill is actually in timing your shots, aiming properly, learning the monster's moveset to know where the face will land, where it will turn to you, all that stuff. So before you start gunning though, I do recommend that you check out the options and change the controls to your liking. Gunner and bow camera controls are customizable, so you can set that up so that you can either fire with R or X. You can have the camera swing to the character direction that like they're facing or not. You can adjust the speed of the reticle and whether or not the aiming mode is on hold or is toggleable. So I'd say to each their own. There's no right way to play ranged weapons, so just set it up to your playstyle. But I do recommend before you start actually like playing the game, go into an area, fiddle around with your settings, and just find out what you're comfortable with. Now, when you're playing bow, I will say that unlike greatsword, don't do the thing where you're kind of like aiming your shots for when the monster turns their head to face you, and then shooting when they turn to look at you, like where their head stops. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll show it, you'll know what I'm saying. Because doing that's going to get you hit. You need to actually aim and land your shots during their head turn, not where their head ends up. Because there's a good chance you're not going to be able to recover your animation in time to be able to dodge the hit or the charge that's going to come shortly after them, like stopping to look at you. So really, you need to be throwing your arrows at the end of a monster's attacks and during their turns, not after or when they're done turning. Also, be careful about your power shots. A lot of the times, if you're too hasty with the power shot, you will stagger the monster on the first volley and waste your power shot, costing you coatings and time and stamina. So just be patient. Trust me, it's hard. I struggle with it a lot, but you gotta be patient when you play with bow. Also, in case you didn't know, 4U maps have a lot of verticality, bumpy terrain, and ledges, and this is especially bad for bow because if you're not in aiming mode, your shots just gonna shoot straight out, and if you're on any sort of elevation difference between you and the monster, you're basically never gonna hit what you're kind of aiming at, and you're gonna be spending extra time going into manual aiming mode and adjusting your shots. It is a slight annoyance just because it makes hunting take a lot longer for bows on nearly every single map because they all have ledges and terrain, and just because you have to just keep constantly going in and out of aim mode. Now, I do use the bow with as little aim mode as possible, just because monster heads are low enough that you can usually just blind fire straight on and hit them, which is great, but you definitely want to get comfortable with aiming mode just because there's a lot of little terrains and stuff that you're going to have to, do macro adjustments for. And it should go without saying, but just in case, you do want to stick to critical distance as much as possible. Duh. You get screen shakes to tell you that you're in a good spot for 4U. If you're landing a shot and the screen shakes a little bit, great, you're at critical distance. But it's generally just medium distance away from the monster, 3 to 5 hops, like a good roll. You'll get used to it, just, take some effort and practice that. And of course, last little tip, gunners have 0 defense and are going to get 1 tapped in G rank and on guild quests. So try to preemptively move away from monsters, meaning that when a monster looks at you, you need to be already moving. You can't shoot them and not expect to get hit. But that's really the only tips I have for bow gameplay. Standard other gunning rules are going to apply. But the last thing I do want to note about playing bow in Old World is that here, dash juices and mega dash juices give you infinite stamina, meaning infinite charging, rolling, whatever. So bow pretty much pounds dash juices all day. So you can still gear up for constitution if you want, especially in the early game, but honestly, it's just easier to just pound dash juices. You can make dash juices with just catalysts, which can eventually just be bought from the vendors, and rare steaks, which can be mass produced. Mega dash juices require dash extract from monsters to make, but if you have a friend, you can do the age-old duplication method of just handing someone your dash juices, closing out the game. As long as you don't save, you're not going to lose what you give, and you can keep it. So it does require 2 people, but you can have infinite dash juices that way. That's how people have done it forever. It even works in World and Rise. But anyway, that's super important to know, but let's get back to the bow. With all that being said, bow is still a pretty good weapon for you. It's not as strong as like greatsword, charge blade, or heavy bowgun, but it's like a B tier weapon. It's okay. It does struggle a lot like when you start getting into guild quests and like end of G rank stuff because you have limited coatings, and the early game is also very rough for bow just due to having bad options for bows in general, and the stamina management can be a pain if you don't dupe your dash juices. I still personally like bow, but I wouldn't really recommend starting a playthrough specifically as bow and strictly bow, because it really only starts getting enjoyable once you get into high rank where your weapons and armor skills really pick up. But anyway, if you're still convinced and you want to play bow, let's get to the meat and potatoes about bow. I want to talk about how bow works in 4U, like the motion values, charges, and all that stuff, and why we use what we use. And just so you know, most of the information about bow can be found on Luxario's blogspot post about 4U and Gen GU bows, which will also be linked in the description below, so feel free to bookmark that if you want to learn more about bow mechanics, and thanks Lax again, because he's maintained that thing for like a decade at this point. So if you've been around the 4U scene at all and looked into bow ever, you're probably going to notice and realize that Sedition, the Seregios bow, is plastered everywhere, and with good reason. It's the only bow we actually need in this game, because in 4U, we have extremely limited options in our bows. Because of a lot of reasons, we get funneled into the Seregios bow. I kind of want to explain all those reasons and kind of why. And we're going to start with the bow coatings. Each bow obviously can use the amount of coatings. As a quick rundown, coats do what they say. Poison coats apply poison, paralysis coats apply paralyze, you get it. Coats are good and they're worth using for like one status application, but that's it due to just them being limited in nature, and you're typically not going to get the second status off. Do note that status coats also override element on bows, so only the raw and statuses will be applied. In general though, power coats are the most important coating, and largely any bow that doesn't have power coats isn't worth using. So bow is extremely limited on its damage because power coats give you a 50% damage boost to your raw attacks in 4U, so when you don't have them on, you're basically cutting your damage by 33%, which is a lot. So because you can only carry 70 total power coats, your damage drops significantly if you can't kill a monster in 70 shots, and for the most part in G-Rank Hub and Guild Quests, you're not going to be doing that. But this is why precision and landing every single shot is super important with bow, because if you keep missing, eventually you're going to have to finish the hunts with much less damage, which is very annoying. Now Seregios' bow comes in and fixes this problem by giving us the added bonus that its close range coats count as power coats, which gives you 40 extra coats for a total of 110. So that's significantly more time where you have that 50% damage boost, and that's amazing. No other bow in the game does that. Another reason why we're forced into the Seregios bow is because it has power shots, which is the follow-up shot that bow can make after its initial volley, which does have charge +1. Power shots are strong because we can get 2 shots in quick succession without having to fully recharge in between, which is of course a huge time save, so more DPS. You can also then charge to 3 and then power shot into 4 with the +1 charge to save you some time, so you don't have to fully charge every single time if you don't want to. So it does let you do some shortcuts and save some time. But not all bows have this like they do in 5th gen, because bows have a variety of arc shots or power shot in 4th gen, and for the most part, all the arc shots are pretty terrible, so you pretty much only want power shot. And in general, we only look at bows that offer power shots. And it just so happens, Seregios bow also includes power shots. So next, bows have shot patterns in 4U like they do in like Rise and such. And if you look at all the motion values for the shot types, you can see that they're all relatively close to each other. But let's take a closer look at each of the shot types. Pierce bows have the lowest motion value, but they do have the longest range. But with the way Pierce works, you're likely not hitting all of those shots into a good hit zone, so you're never going to get the full potential out of your Pierce shots, except maybe something like piercing on Gravios or Dalmador, or something just niche, like a really big monster. That being said, rapid shots have a better total motion value and have a much better time landing all of their shots directly on one good hit zone, like usually it's the face. It's really easy to get the full potential out of rapid shots, and even if you're not using Rapid 5, Rapid 4 are almost just as good and still better than Pierce anyways. Spread shots though are stronger, much stronger actually if you consider the spread up skill grants a 1.3 times modifier to spread shots, while the normal and Pierce modifiers are 1.1 times. So the total motion value of spreads is 33.8 versus normal's 24.2, but you gotta round down numbers and stuff and it gets kind of whatever. But spreads are fat. Spread bows though have two other downsides. Obviously one is the range. Critical distance for spread is much shorter than rapid or pierce, meaning you have to put yourself in danger by getting closer to the monsters and spending more time to position yourself closer. The other kicker is that spreads are really spready, if that makes sense. It's not like World where you can fairly easily shotgun spreads into a monster's face and land all your arrows. In Old World Monster Hunter, spreads can get like 1, maybe 2 hits on a single zone. So for the most part, like Pierce, you're not going to be landing all of these spreads on good hit zones, and a lot of that total damage is going to be reduced by, hitting worse hit zones. So spreads, they do work on some monsters that have really good large gunner hit zones like Gormagala, maybe Rajang, and Diablos, so there are some niche cases where you'd actually want to use spread, but for the most part, rapid or normal shots are the easiest to land consistently. They have good range, they do solid damage, and they're just overall the best. So normals are preferred, and guess what? Sergio's bow has rapid 5 on charge 2 and charge 3, so again, checks off another box there. And lastly, I want to talk about the charge levels for bow. Now bows go from charge 1 to 4. Charge 1 is when you just tap it, charge 2 is the yellow glow, charge 3 is an orangish glow, and charge 4 is the red glow. I will correct myself on screen if that's not right. Now each of these has a modifier to your shot. As seen in this table, you basically never want to throw an uncharged shot, that's a waste. But charge 3 and 4 are pretty different. Charge 4 gets 20% raw damage and 12.5% elemental damage as a bump compared to charge 3. It's important you always try to maximize your charge value, and because of that, you're probably going to realize that the Sedition here only goes up to charge 3 with load up. And then you're probably going to wonder why we use that over something that could have charge 4 bow with rapid arrows that do more raw and elemental damage. So to answer that, we got to take a look at the overall stats of other bows. So the Sedition here has 322 raw, that's a lot. It's got 30% affinity, rapid 5 on charge 2 and charge 3, power shots, and access to power coatings, and the additional close range coatings, which are power coats. The only slight here is that it has a charge 3 limit with load up. So we're going to compare that to some alternatives. The White Vitalis bow has 282 raw with no affinity, rapid 4 and rapid 5 on charge 3 and charge 4, has power shot, but it has no coats. So already you're down 40 raw, 30% affinity, and no power coats. And that's not worth the 20% drop in damage getting a charge 4 shot. That's not even close. Next, we have the Chameleos bow. It's 292 raw, 0 affinity, rapid 4 and rapid 5 on charge 3 and charge 4, power shots, and it has power coats. So this one's actually much closer. But if we consider that Sedition has 30% affinity, which is worth about 7.5% damage, we can average the raw and sieve bow to be 344, and Chameleos getting 20% additional damage on his charge 4 brings up to an average raw of 348, so it's higher, barely. And so basically you'd be trading 40 extra power coats and an overall shorter charge time, since you'll have to go to charge 3, for 4 raw, or 1% damage. And it's not really worth it in my opinion. But that's not to say that the Chameleos bow is bad, it's just Sedition's just a little bit better. And then lastly we have the Nersillo's bow at 262 raw, 50% affinity, rapid 4 and 5 on charge 3 and 4, power shots, but no power coating. No power coatings, automatic deal breaker. Even at 260 raw and 50% affinity, it's not competing with Sieve's 320 raw and 30% affinity. So you're just losing 110 power coats, which is just no. So what I'm trying to get at here is despite Steve's bow only having up to charge 3, no other bow has enough raw, the coatings, or the power shot, or something else that just puts it on the same level as Steve. Steve bow checks all the boxes, and no other bow really does. And so basically we're left with the last question, which is, what about relic bows? So the main bonus that relic bows have, that normal bows don't, is that they can have large values of element without sacrificing their raw, which means that on a good elemental zone, you should be able to deal more damage with the bonus elemental damage to compensate for the lack of affinity and extra power coats granted by the Steve bow. But grinding for the perfect relic bow is a near impossible task, especially if you want to get one for each element. So the TLDR is that yes, relic bows with the highest possible raw, the highest element, and the right shot pattern can deal more damage per shot than the Sredjos bow at certain spots such as Gormakal's face, maybe Rajang's face, Gravio's chest, stuff like that. So yes, technically the relic bow grind is worth it if you want to min-max. But there is one final note with the relic bows, and that any hunt that lies specifically in that 70 to 110 hit range, where Sredjos bow has the bonus coatings, will still be faster to do it with Sredjos bow because the power coats only deal additional raw damage, not elemental damage. And basically most of the G rank hunts outside of the high-end guild quests and such should take you right into that range with Sredjos bow. So take that information and do what you want with it. But if you're in the position where you can edit relics or farm relics, whatever, relic bows are worth it, sure. They're just largely disregarded back in the day because the grind was considered not worth it in the grand scheme of things, and the TA Wiki banned the use of relics anyways. So Steve bow is the best crafted bow possible, and if you want to min-max on relics, sure, you can do that. Okay, so next let's go over the bow progression in 4U now that we know what bow we're using and why. So it's really simple, but I made this handy dandy infographic. Basically, in low rank, you're going to want a decent bow that can throw rapids. Your choices are the standard hunting bow, which you can start with. You can fully upgrade that all the way through high rank, and it has power coats and rapids. Great. You can also run with Nersilla's bow, which is obtained super early on as well. It doesn't have power coats, but it does have plenty of raw, affinity, and rapid shots, which will get you through low rank without too much of an issue. It also comes with poison coats, which isn't super rare. I mean, a lot of bows have them, but poison coats are really strong in the early game because they do flat damage. You can also make the Garuga bow when you get to the end of low rank, and it has power coats when you upgrade it once, so it is a very solid raw bow with rapid shots and power shot. But regardless of what you pick, basically you're only going to be using these up through low rank and maybe early high rank, because once you get to high rank, you're going to have two options to get your Steve bow, and you're going to want to get to Steve ASAP. You can play through the village quests and reach Sredjos there and farm him for your bow, which I think is like, 7-star village or something. It's pretty late into the game, especially if you're using these really terrible low rank bows, but you can still just bum rush to it if you want to. But also, if you have the event quests downloaded, you can get to HR4 in the hub, which doesn't take that long to be honest, and you can take on the event quest Supersonic Sredjos and fight a Frenzied Sredjos much earlier on than you should, and get his parts that way. He can be pretty scary if you go in, with low rank gear, so do be careful, he does hit like a truck. But at least this can be completed in groups, so it can be done really easy that way. But from there though, it's Steve bow forever. All upgrades, rest of the game, Steve bow. While relic farming and doing guild quests, Steve bow. More Steve bow, that's all you want. Okay, so regarding the armor sets and armor skills. Basically, the best armor skills for bow are as follows. Focus obviously increases your charge speed. Yes, we charge a lot, we want to do that less. So focus is great. Save some time. Shot type up, whatever bow type you're using, you want the proper shot type up skill. Typically this is going to be normal up since we like rapids. Load up, this gets us an extra charge on our bows. Some bows will go from charge 2 to charge 3 in Sredjos' case, and other bows may go from charge 3 to charge 4. Do note that this hidden charge is not going to show unless you actually have the load up skill currently equipped, so check your Nico ahead of time. Also, do not play Sredjos' bow until you get load up. It's absolutely trash. You have to have load up. Then moving on down, we have weakness exploit. A +5 on a 45 plus hit zone is very good for us gunners, especially bow who have very limited power coats and need to make each shot count. So you obviously want to be hitting their face all the time anyways, more damage. And this is basically going to be your largest boost of damage that you're going to get out of a skill. It's just not quite as free as a shot type up. So obviously shot type up is a priority. Now from here, you're basically going to want to work on skills that are niche to what you're fighting or what you're using or what you're comfortable with depending on your charms. So things like Challenger 2, obviously great for DPS as well as attack up large or extra large, or elemental attack up if you're getting, relic bows. Evasion and Evade Extender are also very nice for bow skills to feel safer. and often come with a lot of the equipment that we're going to be using, like Shala and Amatsu, so it's not too much effort to throw on one of these skills, and I do recommend one of them. Either Evade Extender or Evasion 1, it helps a lot, trust me. And then Trajectory for crit distance is kind of whatever. You don't really need it, but if you can fit it on with some 5 decorations, go for it, it's an option. But that's basically the only skills you should be trying to throw together. Everything else, what it is. If you can fit it on, great, but it's not going to be that important to your build. So, with all the important skills out of the way, let's take a look at the armor sets. So in low rank, we can get Focus Up and Attack Up Small with a very simple set that has 2 slots available wherever, through weapons, charms, whatever. But it's cut 2 pieces with a Velociprey Waist and Moshgarl Hands. The Moshgarl Hands can be made with Bumble Pumpkins, which are a side product from farming things in the Wycoon, like through the farm, like doing honeys. So do that a lot. You also need to get Killer Beetles, which can be found in Caravan 3 quests, or in the low-rank Frozen Seaway and Primal Forest maps. So fairly early on, you can get a pretty decent set for bow. And at this level, when you only have like 90 to 110 raw for weapons, Attack Up Small is almost as good as Shot Type Up. The charge decorations can be made with Tetsukaber pieces, and you're going to have to trade some of those for Baroth pieces, so you're going to want to hunt that guy a bit. Early high rank, we can squeeze on Normal Up for some extra damage, so you're going to have Normal Up, Attack Up Small, and Focus. And this should be around HR 5 in the hub and Village 6 star. And this set assumes you have a 3-slot charm or anything equivalent to 3 slots available. So like Attack Up 2 1-slot charm's fine, Attack Up 1 2-slot charm's fine, a blank 3-slot charm's fine, Focus 1 2-slot charm's fine. You get the idea. You just need 3 total slots available. If you can't get Attack Up Small, whatever, it's not a big deal. It's 10 raw. But this armor set is going to be around where you want to be fighting Seregios. However, even if you make the Seregios bow right around here, you can't use the bow without load up for charge 3. It's not worth it without it. So in order to swap the Sieve bow, we're going to want to run something like Focus, Load Up, and Attack Up Small, which can be done with just a blank 3-slot talisman. Sieve bow doesn't have any slots, but if you can have a talisman with, anything with Attack Up, 3 slots, loading, whatever, you can get by with just, less slots or 3 total slots again. But try to make something like this. Or you can wait until HR 7 where you fight Kushala, and then you could do Focus, Load Up, and Normal Up, which is a solid bow set. Those 3 skills are like your 3 big skills. Fighting Kush may be a little tough if you're still using low rank armor sets with those really awful bows, but it is doable. The Garuga and their Nasilla bow with poison coats should help a bit with this, but their raw is pretty terrible. Now this set again assumes you're going to have a 3-slot charm, or any charm with reusable points or spaces in skills that you want. So from this setup, you're pretty much not going to change much until mid-G rank around G2. You can use the Cantorex or plenty of other parts and gears to make the same skill setup with significantly more defense, which is helpful, but in general, these 3 skills are going to be with you for a while. And then when you get near the end of G rank, so in like G3, and you're starting to do the Elder Dragons in G rank and such, you're going to be able to squeeze on Weakness Exploit onto the set. And now we're going to be really cooking. You're going to have Wex, Normal Up, Load Up, and Focus. And that's pretty much everything that you want for DPS, minus some other little things here and there. And again, this is still just assuming you give it 3-slot talisman. And then maybe 1 point in any skill that you're looking for. But yeah, it's very achievable. If you've been doing some mining, you're going to have some charm that'll work. It's 4 total slots worth of skills. Now this last section here is for when you're on the guild quest grind. So you have all the cool event quests, and you have much better talismans. You can easily tack on Evade Extender or Evasion 2, but you will need a decent 1-skill talisman for sure, like, Normal Up 5 and like 3 slots, or Normal Up 6 or whatever. But by this point, you should have something usable. But if you don't have anything that great and you still just have like a blank 3-slot charm, you could probably just get by with Evasion 1, or even if not, you can still have much higher armor and have your Wex, Normal Up, Focus, Load Up, which is perfect. Now moving on, when you're absolutely into the min-maxing state, when you have like, relic charms, you can actually fit in something like Challenger 1, and your set could look something like Normal Up, Load Up, Focus, Wex, and either like Challenger 1 or Fleet Feet, which is Evade Extender and Peak Performance. And this is probably the best you're going to get from a Seregios bow set. You can probably get an Evade Extender and Evasion 1, but yeah, you're going to have to need absolutely min-max charms. And then regarding relic bows, if you're going balls to the wall min-maxing and you get a 3-socket bow, you could trade Fleet Feet for Evade Extender and Elemental Attack 3, and that's basically save edited gear at that point. But you can also just run the same set with your Seregios bow for all your relic bows while you're working on that as well. But basically, that's all the bow gear progressions. Obviously, these aren't going to be the absolute, like, you have to run this set because it's all going to be charm dependent. So please look up, you know, some other set builder, either the one on the wiki or download Athena's. Like, trust me, you're going to want to use it and put it in your charms to see what you can make. But you can make pretty decent bow sets with pretty minimal charms. But anyway, that's kind of a lot of info. Some of it's pretty common knowledge in my opinion, but I've also been gunning for a long time. So at the very least, I hope something was useful to you. We kind of go through this as quickly as we could, but yeah, anyway, if you got any questions, let me know. But that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters.